The colony had become a graveyard of forgotten dreams. Cale moved through the empty streets like a ghost, his footsteps echoing against crumbling buildings that once bustled with life. 3 years had passed since the plague took his wife and daughter. He'd chosen to stay behind when the evacuation ships departed. Unable to face a world that no longer contained their laughter, the ruins of the marketplace caught his eye, a place where his daughter once bought strange candies from vendors who'd since vanished. Today, something different stirred among the debris. A small whimper, barely audible over the wind. Cale knelt down and found her wedged behind an overturned vendor's cart. She was small, perhaps 7 by human standards, with translucent skin that shimmered faintly blue in the dim light. Her 4 eyes were wide with terror, luminous like twin moons. She wore nothing but tattered remnants of what might have been clothing, and her fragile frame trembled violently. "It's okay," Cale whispered, extending his hand slowly. "I won't hurt you." The alien girl's eyes darted between him and the narrow opening behind her. She made a sound not quite speech, more like wind chimes in a storm. Despite his caution, Cale felt something crack open in his chest, a sensation he thought had died with his family. "Come with me," he said. "It's warmer inside. You can trust me." It took an hour to coax her out. She eventually took his hand, her skin cool and smooth like polished stone. When their fingers touched, something strange happened, a brief flash of warmth, as if electricity passed between them. The girl flinched but didn't pull away. Cale named her Iris after the way her eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies. He carried her to his home, a modest house on the colony's outskirts. She clung to him, her small arms wrapped around his neck, her head against his chest. As he walked, he felt her heartbeat rapid but steady, synchronizing with his own rhythm. That night, as Iris slept curled on the couch beneath a blanket, Cale sat beside her for hours. He studied her delicate features, the way her skin pulsed with faint bioluminescence, the gentle arch of her small fingers. For the first time in 3 years, he felt the weight of loneliness begin to shift. He reached out and carefully brushed a strand of silver hair from her forehead, careful not to wake her. She murmured something in her strange language and turned toward his hand, seeking warmth even in sleep. Cale felt tears finally come, not tears of grief, but of something new, of hope, fragile and terrifying. The first week was delicate. Iris communicated through a series of musical trills and gestures, pointing to what she needed, avoiding Cale's direct gaze. She was malnourished and skittish, flinching at sudden movements. But her curiosity was boundless. She discovered the kitchen, trailing her fingers along surfaces, examining each object with intense fascination. A wooden spoon became an instrument for music. A glass of water reflected light in ways that mesmerized her. For 20 minutes, Cale found himself rediscovering the world through her eyes. He showed her how to turn the shower on and off, explaining in simple words even though she couldn't understand. She stood under the spray for an entire hour, laughing for the first time. The sound was crystalline, unearthly, like nothing human ears were meant to hear, yet it pierced his heart with its purity. "Good?" he asked tentatively. She looked at him, water streaming down her luminous face, and nodded. Then, impulsively, she reached out and touched his chest directly over his heart. Her eyes met his, all 4 of them focusing on him simultaneously, and she made a sound of profound contentment. That was when his mother called. Cale hadn't seen Elena in months. She'd moved to the residential district after his wife's death, unable to bear the silence of visiting his grief-stricken home. When she arrived for their scheduled tea, she found him nervously tidying the living room while Iris hid behind the kitchen counter, peeking out with suspicious eyes. "Cale, what is that?" Elena's voice was sharp with alarm. "Her name is Iris," he said firmly. "She was dying in the ruins. I couldn't just leave her." His mother's face cycled through shock, disapproval, and concern. Alien? Cale? We don't even know what they eat or if they're safe? He met her gaze calmly. She's 7 years old, Mother. Or the equivalent. She's terrified and starving. Whatever else she might be, right now she's just a child. Elena stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. She'd always been a formidable woman, sharp-tongued and practical. But she'd also raised a son capable of mercy. Show me, she said. Finally, Iris emerged slowly, her body a tense coil of muscles ready to flee. Elena sat down on the couch, making herself smaller, less threatening. She didn't attempt to touch or speak, merely existed in the same space. After 15 minutes, Iris's shoulders relaxed slightly. By the end of the visit, his mother had left a care package of food and instructions for nutrition. More importantly, she'd left with a smile when Iris had tentatively offered her a piece of fruit she'd been saving. A gesture of trust that made Elena's eyes grow wet. She needs you, Elena said quietly as she left. And it seems you need her too. That night, Iris slept curled against Cale on the couch, her hand gripping his shirt. He sat very still, afraid to move, to break whatever invisible thread connected them. Outside, the colony's lights flickered on, pushing back the darkness. For the first time in years, Cale's home felt less like a tomb and more like a sanctuary. 6 weeks passed and Iris transformed. She gained weight, her skin grew more vibrant, its luminescence stronger. She began to mimic sounds, slowly constructing words, though her pronunciation twisted human language into something musical and strange. Ka-El became Kellyan. Water transformed to Watir. Cale didn't correct her. Her versions were infinitely more beautiful. She'd claimed his bedroom, though she refused to sleep without him nearby. They developed a ritual. Cale would lie beside her on the bed, fully clothed, while she curled into his side, her head resting on his chest. Her fingers would find his hand and intertwine with his 4 small digits to 5 of his. Sometimes she hummed songs that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her species' consciousness, melodic and haunting. Cale would match his breathing to hers, and in those moments, it felt as if their heartbeats truly did synchronize. One evening, Elena found them like this and stood in the doorway without speaking. Cale opened his eyes, worried, but her expression was one of profound tenderness. She saw, in this tableau, what her son had needed all along, not just to be needed, but to need in return. To care for something vulnerable and know that care mattered. The connection between Cale and Iris deepened in ways he couldn't fully explain. Sometimes when he thought of something, Iris would seem to know, turning to him with understanding in her eyes. When he was sad, those dark mornings when grief threatened to drag him under, she would press her luminous forehead against his and hum until he surfaced again. "You are my heart family," Iris said one day, the phrase coming out slightly wrong but perfectly understood. Her 4 eyes locked onto his with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "You are mine too," he whispered. Physical affection between them was innocent yet profound. She would climb into his lap like a child, settling against him while he read. She traced the lines on his palms with her delicate fingers, as if reading his future in the geography of his hands. Sometimes she'd place her hand over his heart and leave it there for long stretches, as if reassuring herself that he was still there, still alive, still hers. Cale taught her about human traditions. They baked together, and she found joy in the simple act of mixing ingredients, her concentrated expression adorable as she stirred with tiny fists gripped around the spoon. They danced to old music files, her movements uncoordinated but filled with unself-conscious delight. He braided her silver hair, a task that required patience and care, during which she would sit still, occasionally reaching back to squeeze his hand. Elena came by more often now, sometimes staying for dinner. She brought clothes fitted for Iris's unique frame, helped her learn to read, taught her card games. But Iris's eyes always found Cale, always returned to him as her anchor, her home, one night. As he tucked her into bed, a ritual that had replaced the previous arrangements, Iris caught his hand before he could withdraw it. "Promise?" she asked, using the human word they'd been practicing. "Promise what?" he asked gently. "You stay," she said simply. "Always." Cale sat on the edge of the bed and gathered her into his arms, his chin resting on her small head. "Always," he promised, and meant it with a depth that surprised him. "I promise." Trouble arrived on a gray afternoon when officials from the remaining colony administration showed up at his door with questions. It seemed Iris's presence had been noted by colony censors. The bureaucratic machinery that still functioned began to turn. "You understand," a pale woman named Officer Voss said, "that there's been no contact with the Kether species in over a decade. This creature, her name is Iris," Cale said coldly. "She's a child. Could potentially harbor diseases or be a security risk. We need to take her into custody for observation. It's protocol." His mother, present at the conversation, stood abruptly. "You'll do no such thing. She's his ward, legally speaking. Unless you intend to remove a 7-year-old from the only safe home she's ever known, you'll leave." But the damage was done. Iris, sensing the tension, retreated into herself. She stopped humming and became a silent, watchful presence. At night, she clung to Cale with desperate intensity, her fingers digging into his clothes as if she feared he might be taken from her while she slept. "They want me?" she asked one night, her English still struggling with complex thoughts. "No," Cale said firmly. "I won't let them. You're safe with me." But Iris, with a perception that seemed to transcend her years, understood that his assurance, however sincere, might not be enough. She began to change, becoming almost anxious in her affection, seeking constant reassurance. She would place her hand on his face, turning it toward her, her eyes searching his for signs of abandonment. The intimate moments between them took on a desperate quality. She would fall asleep with her small hand pressed against his heart, as if counting each beat, reassuring herself that he was still there. Cale would wake sometimes to find her watching him, tears bioluminescent droplets that caught the dim light sliding down her luminous cheeks. "I'm scared," she whispered one night. Cale pulled her closer, his large hand cradling her small head. "I know. But listen to me, Iris. I would fight every person in this colony for you. I would burn this place down before I let them take you. You understand?" She nodded against his chest, her form relaxing slightly. But the fear had taken root. Then came the letter. The Kether homeworld had made first contact. They were sending an emissary to investigate the presence of one of their own. Cale felt his world tilt on its axis. What if they came for her? What if Iris's true family wanted her back? He said nothing to Iris immediately, but she sensed the change in him. She became clingy, following him from room to room. One evening, she caught his hand and held it to her forehead, their skin-to-skin contact creating that familiar warmth. "Whatever happens," she said in careful English, "you my family. You stay my family." Cale's throat tightened with tears. "No matter what," he promised. "No matter what." The Kether emissary arrived on a ship that descended through the colony's atmosphere like a second sun. It was terrifying and magnificent, a vessel that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. Cale held Iris's hand as they approached, her fingers trembling in his grasp. The emissary itself was striking taller than Cale, with the same luminescent skin as Iris, but with deeper hues of violet and silver. Its presence commanded the room, and when it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made the air vibrate. But when it looked at Iris, something shifted. Its severe expression softened, and it made a sound a low harmonic chord that seemed to carry profound meaning. Iris's four eyes widened, and she made a responding sound, half fear, half wonder. The emissary spoke in English, its accent adding strange musicality to the words. "This is Ethel's offspring. We believed all of our people in this sector were lost." Cale's heart threatened to stop. He tightened his grip on Iris's hand, unable to let go. "She stayed with me," Cale said, his voice steady. "I found her dying. I gave her everything I had." The emissary was silent for a long moment, then approached. It extended a hand toward Iris, who looked back at Cale. He saw the question in her eyes, the fear that this moment meant goodbye. "You want to go with them?" Cale asked, his voice barely a whisper, though he knew the answer might destroy him. "No," Iris said firmly, turning fully to face the emissary. "Home is with Cale. Home is with Elena. Home is here." The emissary made another harmonic sound, this time clearly one of surprise. It regarded Iris intently, then turned to Cale. "She chooses you." "Yes," Iris said, and then, with four eyes focused entirely on Cale's face, "Always you." The emissary lowered its hand. When it spoke again, its voice carried a strange resonance of respect. "Your people have harsh history with ours. That she has bonded so completely with a human. It is unusual. It speaks to something we had nearly forgotten about ourselves. Capacity for transcendence." It turned back to Iris. "Your mother, Ethel, was a bridge builder. She spent her life seeking understanding between our species. In choosing this path, you honor her legacy. You are free to stay, child of Ethel. Should you ever wish to return, the doors of our world will remain open to you." Iris released a trembling breath. She turned and threw her arms around Cale, her entire body shaking. "I stay," she whispered. "I stay with you. I stay with family." Cale lifted her, cradling her against his chest, his face pressed into her silver hair. He felt the warmth of her small hand against his neck, seeking the pulse of his life, reassuring herself that he was truly there. Elena appeared in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. When the emissary noticed her, it made a small harmonic gesture of acknowledgement, something that might have been a bow. "The matriarch understands," it said. "You are united in caring for one of ours. This is good." As the emissary departed, Cale carried Iris to the window. Together they watched as the magnificent ship rose into the sky, piercing the clouds and disappearing back into the stars from whence it came. But Iris was no longer looking up. Her four eyes were fixed on Cale's face, reading the contours of love there. That night, they lay in their familiar position, Iris curled against Cale's side, her small hand over his heart. But this time, there was no fear, no desperation. Only the quiet certainty of belonging. "Thank you," Iris whispered. "For what?" Cale asked. "For finding me," she said simply. "For choosing me like I chose you." Cale pressed a kiss to her forehead, his hand stroking her luminous hair. "Always," he promised again. "Through anything. Through everything." And as they drifted toward sleep, their heartbeats synchronized in the darkness. Cale finally understood that love wasn't measured by shared biology or species or history. It was measured in the moments when another being chose you fully and completely, and you chose them back. In the quiet certainty that you would face whatever came together. In this house on the edge of an abandoned colony, a lonely man and an alien girl had built something that transcended worlds. They had built a family. They had built home. And that, Cale thought as sleep claimed him, was the most miraculous thing of all.